I grew up around here in the northeast and seaside, and there wasn't much access to art. I didn't really go to galleries, and ended up training as an engineer, and then for whatever reason I kind of moved. I had the opportunity to go back to college, and I'd always drawn. I enjoyed drawing and cartoons and comic books, album covers, science fiction, kind of thinking that I could go work making science fiction special effects. Ended up doing a foundation and was kind of really enjoyed that at Middlesbrough. It kind of opened my mind to a lot of different things. Went to Cardiff, had a great time there, and just kind of the world of painting just really opened up. I feel that the current paintings, and by that I mean probably like the last 4 or 5 years, are kind of coming into something that makes sense as much as a painting can make sense to the person doing it at the time. I guess that before, my paintings were a little bit more brash, and I've always been very influenced by certain American painters, people like Clifford Still, the transitions between periods of Philip Guston, but then with kind of a British sensibility somehow. I guess it was one of those things of, that again I'll talk about, that throwing off the baggage of things, and I didn't care if they looked contemporary or not. I wanted them to be I wanted them to be pleasurable to look at. Just that pleasure of looking, and that one-to-one relationship with a painting. Painting has an extraordinary way of doing that, which I don't think other art forms do. And that sounds like a grand claim for painting, and it is, but before, the paintings were quite dark and very dark in tone. Sometimes I was making them harder to look at, hoping that people would look at them longer. So, just that pleasure in looking, but really I was maybe cutting my nose off to spite my face. That why wouldn't you make something pleasurable to look at? They're very much landscape paintings, and to reclaim some of that territory that's been lost, or maybe get into quite interested to looking what that territory for landscape painting might be now, given that idea of cliched subject matter, or looking at slightly the temperature of that idea of a place in terms of where we live now and the times we're in. And that will always be political with a small p, but even though painting has this internal language, it's always, things soak in over time. Maybe not explicitly, but you can't always ignore the world outside the studio. It's not escapism, but painting can offer that contemplation or relationship that allows for other things, other thoughts to happen. And you can't ignore the world outside your window, but it doesn't have to be explicit. And providing a world away from that seems as valid, or if not more so, than making an overt political statement, especially within the confines of an art world where you're talking to a lot of the same people. I'm much more interested in a much broader audience. So I think moving, obviously I've been in Wales for such a long time, and there was an element that the paintings were about other places mixed in with places that I've lived, and that landscape element became, it was moving back north. I felt that it was always there, and that the paintings now are of places that I've lived or wanted to go, and I veer away from making grand statements about them, but there's almost like a longing or wanting to belong somewhere, but it's always more about, it's kind of that slightly melancholic act of longing grounded in the romantic nature of painting. We used to talk a lot about almost like you were stood atop a cliff edge, and I grew up on the top of a cliff with a massive horizon, that you're looking down and swooping, and that you can do that through the painting. It rolls through different repetitions, and that it's like looking down into something is like where I see where I'm painting them from. But obviously I'm taller than everybody else as well, so but you're definitely gazing into something that can go on forever. You do find yourself looking for places and a vantage point, and then once you've found one, it leads you to another. So there is an element of almost, a map is a good way of referring to it. And sometimes you're throwing those elements in there to jar against that awkwardness again. So some will appear to be a boat, or it might be your classic kind of how kids draw birds, just that little V, but then that V turns into the edge of a hill, or it could turn into the soft edge of a cloud, which turns into a tree. And I like playing those things off each other. You've got lots of different trees turn into lampshades, into golf umbrellas, or kind of beach umbrellas, but they never seem quite fixed. They're always moving between one thing and another. So just when you think you've got one perspective on it, it can easily shift to something else. There's kind of like a contradiction in the paintings sometimes, that they are quite rough and almost quite, they're not the most technical of paintings, but they're very, a lot of the marks individually are very abstract, but as a whole, I'm hoping that they kind of act as one. And that kind of stillness that you come from, that relationship to a single image or a single painting, whereas you may not pick it up directly, but like someone like Giorgio Morandi is just kind of like that stillness and that wholeness and objecthood of a painting. All of those different components need to act as one thing for it to be successful, I think. I kind of need not to be liked, but to be, I guess, to have some kind of universal appeal, which sounds completely ridiculous, but that there's recognisable element things, and there was a point through that honesty, kind of like if it started looking like a boat or a bird, then you let it be a bird, or you let it be a boat or a hill or a cloud, and then those things are there, and then they become about rhythm and repetition, and it becomes about the painting. Like the small works are works of themselves, the much smaller paintings, and the larger ones are not versions of those paintings, but obviously the increase in scale starts to reveal some of like the backbones of the paintings, the structure of the paintings, and I definitely find some of the paintings directly refer to just all of those Japanese prints that the French artists were interested in, because you've got those multiple perspectives, you've got those multiple horizon lines, you'll have a journey through that painting, there's a narrative there compositionally, and they're held together in such a certain way that you can start to use that. Maybe very at the early stages, it hangs the painting together. And of course, you work against that, but then kind of realizing that on that scale, they do become about almost like a tapestry, or a much larger, large blocks of colour, but you can follow a certain compositional lines, and it will lead you to other parts of the painting, which I think those Japanese prints just do amazingly well. They're just a whole world in one image. I mean, I'm always really interested in people's comments on what they perceive that they in the painting, what they've seen in the painting, or what it reminds them of. And I love all that, because I love it when they see things that I can get in it, or what they've picked up of it. And often there's quite a regular comment that when they've online, for example, when they Instagram, if they've seen the smaller paintings are roughly around 30 by 25 centimeters, but obviously on a platform like Instagram, that's not you're not seeing that information. So a lot of the time when people have seen them in the flesh, they'd be like, I thought this was like a 6-foot painting. And then weirdly, the larger paintings, people thought, I thought that was a much smaller painting. And I think when they're at scale, when things are slightly more exposed, that the mark making looks like there's enough of it that it would be in a smaller painting, and vice versa, that there's so much detail and underpainting on the smaller paintings that it looks like it should be a much larger painting. What I think or would hope is, what I get is from those comments, is that both images are successful paintings in that they have that objecthood. They look like a solid image, like a painting. It's always in the back of my head, that history of painting, and for a while, like I guess a lot of other painters would say similar, that you're always under that weight of that historical neighbourhood. It was part of like this throwing off that baggage of weight and not being scared to be. I always thought of painting as always being on a timeline, almost time travel, is that you can go back, you can go forward, you're in the moment, and painting has got a very particular way of doing that. I could talk about it, but I've no understanding of why, like the Matisse painting of the goldfish in the bowl, why it works so fantastic. Because its individual component parts are all, but it's just an amazing image. And I really like how there's an artist called Paul Housley who, and I've nicked it loads of times, it says like, despite all of these things and all the talk, it's like you're still pushing coloured mud around with a hairy stick. And I can't get away from that when I'm doing it. But you're always trying to make it inventive and trick yourself out of that obvious way of looking. So it builds up in a different way, but you're still just pushing this coloured mud around and trying to make it work.